Welcome to Hebrew Words in Scripture. This is Lesson 54. Let's look at the English word ox and oxen as it appears in Hebrew in the Bible.
I always thought that an ox was simply a castrated bull. I was a little surprised that Webster's dictionary gives the first definition as any animal of the bovine family. But his second definition is, of course, then the castrated bull. The word ox or oxen appears approximately 170 times in the Old Testament in the Bible. Most of those times it's H7794 or H1241. Only twice it appears as H504. We'll explore those most common uses, and then finally we'll look at the rarer one. I really like this verse in Proverbs 14:4, where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox. I find this humorous in that it's the masterful grasp of the obvious, where there's no activity, things are usually in order, but with an oxen there, it's obviously going to be a little bit of a mess. We see here the last word, ox, H7794 is what we're going to look at. But then we also see at the first of the verse, H504, which we'll look at later. The concordance gives us for H7794 the word Shin, Vav, Resh, pronounced shore. And of course there's the definition there. It's an ox, a bull, a head of cattle, for plowing, for food, and as sacrifice. The origin is H7788, which we'll look at, and means simply a bullock, or if we look farther down, it says a bull, a cow, or an ox. Interesting, the word 7788 is spelled the same, Shin, Vav, Resh, and is pronounced pretty much the same, shore, but it indicates that it means to travel or journey or to go, traveler. And we see the primitive root in Strong's definition means to turn, and that is to travel about, in parentheses, as a harlot or a merchant, obviously going around the city, going around the streets of the city. The other common word used for ox is bakar, bet, kuf, resh. We see that it means cattle, herd, oxen, ox, cattle or a cattle herd. And we see the Strong's definition is a beeve or an animal of the ox kind of either gender. So it's not just the bullock or the bull, but it's used for plowing, collectively a herd, a beeve, calf, cow. So generally speaking, this is a animal that's is used for plowing. It says this word for ox comes from the word H1239, and so if we go there, we see the same Hebrew letters, bet, kuf, resh, bakar, the same pronunciation, but the word means to seek, to inquire, to consider. Seeing on down there, the primitive root properly to plow, or generally to break forth, that is to inspect or admire. This is a curious thing. I guess perhaps it is implying that the Animal is teachable in the sense that it can be taught or trained to do certain tasks. And lastly, we see H504, Aleph Lamed Pei. Aleph, it means cattle, oxen, used in farming or as a possession. Interestingly enough, we go down to Strong's definition and we see it's a family, also from the sense of yoking or taming an ox or a cow. And it says this word comes from H502. And we see H502 is the same letters, Aleph, Lamed, Pei, Aleph, but now it means to learn or to teach. So the idea, I think, is that this Aleph, the ox, is a teachable creature. So we have two different words that are used for ox that get some of their origin from the idea of teaching or teachable. And I hope you recognize that this word for ox, Aleph, is the same as the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. If we go back to our chart on the ancient symbols for the letters in Hebrew, we see that the Egyptian hieroglyph in 1859 BC was, the picture of the head of a cow. And we see later on, between 1859 and 550 BC, the word was Aleph, and it stood for cattle. It represented cattle. And there's another picture of a head. You see the symbolic graphical image. It's a little bit, it doesn't look like an animal, but it's still, you can see the head and the horns. And finally, we see that has changed into our current Aramaic Hebrew for the characters that we are looking at and reading. So here we have the word for ox symbolized by the letter Aleph.